Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Fridays from the Farm with Farmer Chris. This week has been hot, and we have been lacking in rain so much. So you can see behind me, we're watering the garden. Broadcast watering isn't always the best option for our watering, but right now we're maintaining our irrigation system, trying to get it up and running, and so we do what we can. But the reason that broadcast watering isn't the best is because some of that water that's thrown out into this warm air evaporates before it can have any real effect on the plants. And part of that is because of the way the soil is able to absorb or resist water. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to get scientific this week. We're, of course, going to find something curious and get wild with some chickens, because they're always on the look for something goofy. Hope y'all are having a terrific week and finding ways to stay cool, stay hydrated, and keep your wonderful plants growing. Thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you next week. Take care. So I wanted to get closer to some of our soil, and the best place to do that for me right now is right here in our rain garden. I'm standing in the section that would be catching some of that low water, but it's not, because we haven't had any. It does give me a chance, though, to look at some soil that is incredibly hydrophobic right now.
Hydrophobic describes something that tends to repel or even fails to mix with water. An example of another substance that is hydrophobic is oil.
The soil would have a really hard time picking it up, and that's because all of the particles of soil are so close together that the adhesion of the water would just slide off the top. So we'll do an experiment here in a little bit. We'll get curious about some of this soil and kind of check it out and see what water does. But I wanted to take a look at this space because I think it's a nice look at what the soil does when it gets really dry and really hard. So this is clay. Here we have a little bit more compost. You can see better organic matter in there, and it breaks up a little more easily. And so I'll be interested or curious about how this soil responds to water versus this more clay structure. But before we go and get curious about that, I wanted to look at this. Look at these cracks. To me, this is one of those amazing things in that our farmer didn't do this. Mr. Flanagan did not create these cracks in the soil. This is from the moisture leaving the soil and it retracting and shrinking and essentially creating these really large fissures. I just think that's so interesting and would love to be here when rain comes and changes that structure. So interesting. Well, that's enough of that. Let's go get curious, huh? Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Curious Corner. These are 3 different soil profiles that I found here in the backyard at Brookside. Here we have one that is from our compost pile, predominantly compost. Over on this side, we have that block that is pretty much clay, solid clay, that is from one of our projects. And here we have one that is a really nice mix between both. And I was really curious after talking about hydrophobic soil and the idea of absorbency in our different soils, I wanted to do an experiment. So here we go. I'm going to do our best to try and get this. So we're going to take water and we're going to pour it over our compost. And you can see that right away the water beads in some places, but then it begins to absorb. And so you can see we can pause. Water absorbs a little more, and now, as we add more water and that hydrophobicness goes away, the soil is able to absorb a little more. Let's go all the way over here to our clay. See what happens here. We're going to pour our water on, and you can see that it changes colors right away, and it does absorb it, but as we pour more on, we can see that the water is continuing to go off the top and pool underneath. So this block of soil is not necessarily absorbing any or as much. Whereas this one, if we come back and we pour it in, you can see that less water is coming out the bottom. So this soil is able to absorb. Now let's go to our middle. We can pour it on the top and very phobic, almost running completely out. Maybe absorbing a little bit, but really not much at all. So the clay's absorbed as much as it can. The compost as well, but seems to have quite a bit more. We can take it and see, and it's still pretty dry in the middle, whereas this one doesn't break down hardly at all, and this one is solid as a rock. Curious soil profiles? I would encourage you to go find some dirt, play in it, use some water around it, see what you can find out. Stay curious, and I hope you enjoy your own experiments. Take care. You all want to hear a joke about paper? Never mind, it's terrible.